All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to Diabetes Talk. I'm your host, Charlie O'Connell, and tonight's topic is understanding exercise and insulin. And guys, we are really going to be breaking down the key information that you need to know, whether you're a person living with type 1 diabetes and you have to manage insulin during your exercise, or if you're a person that has a condition called insulin resistance and you're trying to figure out how exercise can actually help you improve your sensitivity to insulin, we're going to really break those things down, okay? So the first thing is, what we have to start off with is understanding what is insulin, okay? So insulin is a hormone that's produced by your pancreas. Your pancreas is an organ in your body. And the hormone insulin does primarily two things. Insulin causes the absorption of glucose into your liver, muscle, and fat tissue. Okay? So that is the primary purpose of the hormone insulin. When your blood sugar levels go up, because, for example, let's say you've had breakfast and those sugar molecules now start to circulate around your blood and they're looking for a place to go, insulin is released into your body, and the hormone insulin causes the absorption of that glucose into your liver, your muscle, or your fat tissue. And if you joined us here before, I've talked a lot about the parking lot analogy. And what the parking lot analogy is you can think of the tissue where glucose is supposed to be stored in your body as parking lots. And what insulin does is insulin actually causes the absorption of glucose into those parking lots. All right? Now, that's the primary thing that insulin does. It causes the absorption of glucose. But it does something else. Insulin inhibits fat metabolism. So what that means is that insulin, the hormone insulin, when it becomes present in your body, prevents fat metabolism from happening. And this is very, very important if you are going to have success with exercise and diabetes, and very, very important in understanding how to manage your insulin. And most people don't understand that. Almost everybody living with diabetes understands the relationship between insulin and glucose. They understand that insulin causes the absorption of glucose. They don't understand the equally important relationship between insulin and fat metabolism, and the fact that insulin inhibits fat metabolism. All right? So that's the first thing, understanding what is insulin. Now, insulin is not the only thing that's produced by your pancreas. There's another hormone that's produced by your pancreas, and that hormone is called glucagon. Now, one of the things that's really challenging about diabetes is there are many terms that sound very similar. So, for example, you have glucose, glucagon, glycogen, glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis. These are all terms that sound very similar, but they mean very, very different things. Okay? So, what we're going to talk about now is the hormone glucagon. Glucagon is also created in your pancreas, okay? And your glucagon is created in something called alpha cells in your pancreas. So glucagon is created in the alpha cells of your pancreas. Insulin is created in the beta cells of your pancreas. Now, in a healthy, functioning, non-diabetic metabolism, insulin and glucagon play a very sophisticated tango with each other. They have a symbiotic relationship, and they work together in tandem to stabilize your blood sugar levels. So, when you eat food, okay, and that food converts into energy, which ultimately converts into glucose, insulin is released from the pancreas to cause the absorption of that glucose, to lower your blood sugar levels. Okay? But when there's not food available, when your blood glucose levels are low because you don't have a food-derived source of glucose, the hormone glucagon is released from your pancreas. And what glucagon does is it signals your liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream, and it also signals your fat tissue to start breaking down and converting triglycerides. Triglycerides are the form that glucose takes when they are stored in your fat tissue, to start converting triglycerides back into glucose, raising your blood sugar. So an easy way to understand this is insulin causes your glucose levels to go down, glucagon causes your glucose levels to go up, and they work together to maintain stable blood sugar levels. And this is very, very important to understand. Okay? Now, when we are talking about exercise and insulin, there's two general things to talk about. And I'm going to talk first about the relationship of insulin and specifically using exercise to increase your sensitivity to insulin. Okay? So, I mentioned those parking lots, right? Let's really talk about that and explain that a little bit more. So when you eat food, and that food, let's say you eat a banana. So you eat the banana, and that banana, you digest that banana, and it becomes ultimately glucose in your blood. Okay? That glucose will travel to the first parking lot, that parking lot for sugar. And the first parking lot is actually your brain. Your brain is the VIP parking lot for sugar in your body, and it's the first place that a sugar molecule will travel, and it's the first place that insulin actually interacts with. Now, if your brain has a few empty spaces, the sugar molecule will go in there, and insulin will help to cause the absorption of that sugar into your brain. But if there are no empty spaces, if your brain is full of sugar and you don't need any more sugar in your brain, the sugar molecule will travel to the next parking lot. And the next parking lot is your liver. Now your liver can store between 70 and 80 grams worth of sugar. Okay? And if a sugar molecule arrives to your liver, and there's space inside your liver, insulin will cause the absorption of that sugar into your liver. But if there is no space, if your liver is full of sugar, it doesn't matter how much insulin is present in your body. If there's no space for sugar in your liver, there's no space for sugar in your liver. And if that's the case, the sugar molecule will travel to the next parking lot, which is your muscle tissue. Now, your muscle tissue is the primary tissue in your body where sugar is supposed to be stored, and it's the primary tissue in your body that insulin is designed to interact with. Your body can store anywhere from 250 to 800 grams worth of sugar in your muscle tissue. Now, if a sugar molecule shows up to your muscle tissue and there's no room for sugar, all the spaces are full, it doesn't matter how much insulin is present in your body. If there's no room for sugar in your muscles, there's no room for sugar in your muscles. And if that's the case, the sugar molecule proceeds to the last parking lot, which is your fat tissue. Your fat tissue is made up of something called adipocyte cells. Adipocyte cells are little tiny cells where sugar is stored inside of them. Now, the average human being has between 30 to 40 billion adipocyte cells. And when those adipocyte cells are full, that represents about 30 pounds of fat. So 30 pounds of adipocyte tissue, 30 pounds of fat tissue is actually the healthy limit of fat storage. Now, depending on your genetic susceptibility to type 2 diabetes and your ability or lack thereof to create more fat cells, if you fill up your fat parking lot, okay, it doesn't matter how much insulin is present in your body. If there's no place for the sugar to be stored, there's no place for the sugar to be stored. And basically, that is why people develop type 2 diabetes. Now, what does exercise have to do with this? Well, as soon as you start exercising, your muscles start burning up the sugar that's already been stored in them, and you start creating the space for excess sugar to be stored in your muscles by excess insulin. And muscle mass is a key metric to reducing and controlling your diabetes. And here's the reason why. Improving your muscle mass is one of the best things you can do to improve your diabetes and improve your sensitivity to insulin. And here's the reason why that is. After the age of 25, our bodies start to naturally lose muscle mass if we don't exercise consistently. And we can lose that muscle mass at up to 2% a year. So here's the thing. If you're 45 years old and you haven't exercised in 20 years, you can actually have lost 40% of your muscle mass. And if you've lost 40% of your muscle mass, you've actually lost 40% of your body's ability to store sugar in the place where it's supposed to be. As soon as you start exercising, as soon as you start building back up your muscle mass, you start changing the dynamic of sugar storage in your body, and you start changing your sensitivity to insulin. And this is the whole key point to understand. The larger your muscles are, the more frequently you exercise them, and the more frequently you deplete the glycogen out of your muscles. Now that's a big term, okay? So what glycogen means, glycogen is the term that is used for when sugar is stored in your muscles. When you deplete the glycogen out of your muscles, when you deplete the sugar out of your muscles, you increase your sensitivity to insulin because you need less insulin to cause the storage of that sugar. Now, you may have heard the analogy that insulin is like a key that opens the cell, okay? And that is true. Insulin is like a key that opens the cell. But insulin does not determine how much room is available in that cell. All right? This is why, guys, exercise has such a fundamental impact on type 2 diabetes. It's why exercise can be a solution for people that are at risk for diabetes. It's a solution for preventing diabetes. And I really, really want to encourage you, the more you exercise, the more you sweat, the more you are going to get in terms of taking back control of your diabetic situation. And specifically with the term insulin resistance, the more you exercise, the less and less insulin resistance you will experience. All right? Now, here's the thing. Ultimately, okay, that is why exercise is so important and so fundamental for people with type 2 diabetes. But let me now turn to people with type 1 diabetes and understanding how to manage the presence of insulin when you exercise. Remember how when I started this conversation, I said that insulin does two things in your body. Insulin causes the absorption of glucose, and it also simultaneously inhibits fat metabolism. Well, that's very, very important to understand if you are going to manage the presence of insulin if you have type 1 diabetes. And the key to managing the presence of insulin during exercise is understanding the sources of energy that your body is naturally designed to use to provide you with energy to perform activity. All right? And I'm going to really, really break that down. So, I'm going to use an example because this can be really complicated and I do well with examples. So, I'm going to assume that you've been to the gym before. And if you go to any gym in America and you get on any cardio machine, that cardio machine, whether it's a treadmill, a bike, or an elliptical, will have a graph on it. And the graph will have your age and your heart rate. And then in big diagonal words going across the side, it'll say fat burning zone. And what that is referencing is, depending on the heart rate that you exercise in, your body is designed to utilize and recruit different sources of energy to meet the needs of that activity. And the ratio of those sources of energy changes. Now, when you do aerobic exercise, so aerobic exercise would be things like walking or jogging or biking. Your body is designed to do something called fat oxidation. That is what the term aerobic means. Aerobic means with oxygen. And fat oxidation, okay, requires a very, very low presence of insulin. Why is that? Because the presence of insulin blocks fat metabolism. The presence of insulin blocks fat oxidation. So if you have type 1 diabetes and you're preparing to do aerobic exercise, you fundamentally need to understand that aerobic exercise requires fat utilization. You need to understand that your body is designed to utilize fat as an energy source, and you therefore need to adjust the presence of insulin accordingly. And I want to encourage you to check out one of our videos. The video is called Follow Your Heart. And in that video, I really, really break down heart rate by heart rate, the actual ratios of fat utilization, okay, and understanding how to actually manage the presence of insulin. But for today's talk, I'm really going to keep it more conceptual, okay, at a little bit of a higher level. And the point is, you need to understand that insulin inhibits fat metabolism. So anytime you are doing an exercise that requires fat metabolism, you want to take that into account. Now, the opposite is true for anaerobic exercise. So anaerobic exercise means without oxygen. And anaerobic exercise recruits a metabolic pathway that's called a glycolytic pathway of energy. And what the glycolytic pathway of energy means is that your body supplies energy in the form of glucose, okay, without the need for fat oxidation. And this form of energy requires the presence of insulin. It's the exact opposite. So what are example exercises? Well, for example, heavy weightlifting, or a boxing match, or if you are a hockey player and you're doing a 3-minute shift, any type of activity that takes your heart rate into an anaerobic zone is going to require a higher presence of insulin than an activity performed in an aerobic zone. And what it all fundamentally has to do with is understanding, what does insulin do in your body? Insulin does two things in your body. Insulin causes the absorption of glucose and simultaneously inhibits fat metabolism. All right? Now, I really want to encourage you, if what I just shared with you is causing you to really think and pause for a second, I want to encourage you, number one, check out our video, Follow Your Heart, because I really, really break it down in a step-by-step way, how as the heart rate increases, how the presence and need for insulin changes. I also want to encourage you to explore how your diet is impacting the need for and the requirement of insulin. So we just had a question come through that asked about the keto diet. So what the keto diet is it's a reference to a diet that is high fat, low carb. And when you consume a high fat, low carbohydrate diet, you reduce the presence and need for insulin, okay? Because you're not consuming as much carbohydrate. And fundamentally, generally speaking, that is generally a good idea. If you have diabetes, you should not be consuming an excessive amount of carbs, and there are many, many people that would argue you should be consuming a lower amount of carbs than the average person. Because the bottom line is, if you have diabetes, regardless of the actual type of diabetes, that fundamentally means that your body has trouble processing carbs. Okay? Now, a ketogenic diet, the concept of the ketogenic diet is, well, if I eat foods that are high fat and low carbohydrate, I'm going to reduce the presence or need for insulin, and I'm going to train my body to utilize the macronutrient fat as an energy source, and that's also ultimately going to train my body to utilize and recruit stored fat as an energy source. And generally speaking, that is true, but there's one very, very important caveat. There is never a case when your body requires zero insulin. Your body always needs a little bit of insulin. And that's very, very important to understand. And there's something called ketoacidosis. What ketoacidosis is a very, very dangerous complication that's associated with diabetes, and it can be life-threatening. And what it is people develop ketoacidosis when their body is utilizing fat exclusively as an energy source, and they don't have any presence of insulin in their body. And the way that you know if you are at danger or at risk for ketoacidosis is if your blood sugar is above 250. So this is very important to understand, because in fact, the keto diet or the ketogenic diet is something that is a popular term right now. Okay? So ketones and this is where the term ketogenic diet comes from, ketones are become present in your blood when your body is utilizing fat as an energy source. And generally speaking, that is not a bad thing. But if you have the presence of ketones in your blood and your blood sugar is above 250, that is a very, very bad thing. And your body needs insulin. Your body needs insulin immediately. So don't make that mistake of thinking that, oh, well, if I don't eat any carbs and I just follow a ketogenic diet, that'll make me get back control of my diabetes, because that is not necessarily the case. The presence of insulin is required for the human body to function properly. The presence of insulin is required for life. Okay? It is an essential hormone that is meant to be produced. Okay? Now, people with diabetes have a dysfunction with the presence of insulin. Sometimes they don't have enough insulin being produced. Sometimes there's no insulin being produced. Sometimes there's too much insulin being produced. But fundamentally, what we are trying to achieve is to get back into harmony, to get back into that balance of what we originally talked about. Understanding what is insulin. Insulin is a hormone, right? Secreted by the pancreas. There's another hormone called glucagon. It's also secreted by the pancreas. And those two hormones together, they work together to maintain and stabilize glucose levels. All right? And ultimately, your goal should be to get back as close as possible to that alternating balance. That presence of insulin going up when food-derived sugar is becoming present in your body, and then that presence of glucagon going up when there isn't the presence of food-derived glucose. And ultimately, healthy fat metabolism is stimulated and achieved more than any way else through a healthy diet that's low in calories and high in vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And that's the last thing I want to leave you on. If you want to get your insulin levels to an optimum level, if you want to start to achieve healthy fat loss and healthy fat metabolism, it all starts with a diet that is high in vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And if you start there, you're going to create the actual food foundation for then the management of insulin, for the normalization of the presence of insulin in your body, and you're going to start to create an actual foundation for success, for utilizing exercise, for taking back control of your life and taking back control of your diabetes. And with that note, guys, we are going to end it. I hope this information has been useful to you, and I really want to encourage you. If you have any other questions, reach out to our digital coaches, check out the other information that we have in GlucoseZone, and check out our video, Follow Your Heart. All right? And have a great night.